Oh, yeah. Here we go. What's happening, guys? Known investor here. Hope everyone is doing well today. Just wanted to get a live stream going. I was going to do another regular video update, but I figured being away for a few days, might as well do a live stream. See how this market is doing. It's good to see some green across the board finally. We've been seeing some pretty good alt rallies since late last week anyway. BTC has still been sitting range bound, but many of these alts are moving nicely. And today especially, really starting to show some life. So it's good. I've been enjoying some of these small trades here. Yeah, I say small. I mean, they're decent sized moves in a couple of days, no doubt. But certainly getting things going for October. It's nice to see. We're going to take a look at a few of these setups. Some of these setups I've shared with my private group, as you guys know, but I think some of these are still viable. And so we're going to take a look at quite a few of these. There's some pretty decent setups out there right now. Ultimately, as I always say, it's going to come down to what Bitcoin does, but I have a bullish bias right now. Bitcoin is leaning bullish, but it's still battling some resistance and some support. It's still very much range bound. And that's going to be the theme today, as you will gather before the end of the stream, is don't get complacent. Don't get comfy, because yeah, things are looking up, but we know how quickly things change in this market. And so it's going to maintain the same disciplines for me, maintain the same approach, moving the stops, taking the profits, and just riding it for as long as it goes, because I know things change quickly. But long-term picture is really starting to look good. We'll look at some BTC pairs on the alts. And if you missed my newsletter, I sent out a newsletter on Friday talking about some of the long-term picture. And if you missed that, check that out. You could probably get a link to that on Twitter. I posted it on Twitter as well. And so look out for that. But, some of the long-term picture in the alts is really starting to look good. And it's time to pay attention. It's really what it comes down to. It's time to pay attention. This last couple of weeks, months of crypto has lulled many a trader and investor into just kind of going, it's not doing anything right now. And it wasn't, to be fair, but it's time to start paying attention here. So I'm going to go to this chart real quick. This is a chart I posted on Twitter yesterday. And really what I wanted to come down to was I was looking at the volatility of the price action for BTC over the last, distracted myself there, over the last couple of weeks here. And let me adjust my settings here because I use a different setting for this. But if you look at this, this is just a volatility measure. The bottom indicator here is your average true range for the 10 periods. And you can see it's just tanking, right? The average true range is just really starting to get down here at the lows. And it just signifies that this price range is getting very tight, very flat. And this is really the flattest it's been probably all year, to be honest with you. For this long at least, right? It's just been very tight. And so here I have a couple of indicators on the charts. I've got the Bollinger Bands, the red and the blue lines here. You can see how they're just really starting to constrict here. And the blue little channel here is a Keltner channel. And you can see when these really start to trade inside the Keltner channel, really all that tells you is that the standard deviation for your 20-period trading is trading within or lower than the average true range. And translated that into English means prices are really freaking tight and really flat. Volatility is really low. And really what that means is it's just going to translate into a potential big move. Could it go either way? Absolutely. But that's really precedes big movement, because generally markets don't sit that tight, that flat forever, right? They don't sit that tight for a long time. But it's definitely there. It's reaching historic volatility levels from the low end. Is it the lowest? I don't know, but it's definitely down there, right? We're not seeing this sideways price action last this long. So that's good, because it's also letting the alts set up. We've seen the same type of patterns. Let me go to a different chart here. Got too many windows open. We've seen the same type of patterns showing up in the alts, and we'll start to go through those through the course of this stream. But you can see here, EOS, sitting pretty tight. ETH sitting very symmetrical, breaking out right now. But a lot of the alts, very similar price action. If you caught my last video, I was talking about IOTA, I was talking about EOS, and the same story, right? Just flat, narrow, the bulls, the bears, really battling it out, trying to show what the next direction is going to be. But today we're seeing the bulls win a little bit here, have some volume coming in, pushing prices higher. And so that's good news all around. So that we'll get to it. We'll show some setups. I'll get into the specifics, targets, ranges, patterns, stuff that I'm looking at. A lot of the big names, and then we'll definitely take a look at some of the names that you guys want to look at. But before I get started, you guys know I don't put commercials on my YouTube channel, and I don't do a lot of that other stuff, and I try not to shill as much as I can. But I do have some things to offer from time to time. So before we get going, the first thing I want to mention is the Node Insiders group. I will be closing this today. We have already had our kickoff. We had our live stream kickoff today, earlier today in the morning. So we're just getting started for October. If you want to join us, it's not too late. There's 9 spots left here, but regardless whether or not it sells out, I will close this today, my time. And so check that out. You can go to nodeinvestor.com. On the training page, there's a link to this if you want to learn more information about what it is. It's $200 to get started. After that, members can renew at a discount, much better price than that. But the first time you get in, that's what it is. And the other thing is the Node Insiders alerts. A lot of my trades and ideas and setups come from this, right? You can certainly set your own alerts and all that fun stuff manually. I do on TradingView. I do plenty of alerts that I set manually, and they get sent to my phone and my email and all that good stuff. But these alerts are proprietary, and they scan the market for you. So you don't have to go manually chasing things down. And in fact, some of my better trades come from this because they're generally names that are not on the radar, and they pop up and you see some very good setups and some things that are moving. So if you want to learn more about that, nodeinsiders.com is where you get that information. If you're in the Node Insiders group, you get access to those alerts while you're part of the group there. So, all right, let's get to it. Enough of that. We will come back to those alerts later. But let's take a look at the big names first. So I'm going to go to BTC here. And here on the chart, I've highlighted, there's a couple of things here. Let me hide volume and some of these other indicators just to not distract us. But there's a couple of levels that I'm watching here near term. So you can see on the lower end, right, there's this rising support line, right? It's not exact, but the general trend is there, right? A series of higher lows that are starting to form. And we've seen that major resistance, and this is a daily chart, mind you, major resistance has showed up here around that $6,800 level over the month of September and kind of now going into October. And that's going to really still be the key level to be watching, right? A close above that 6,800 level would be significant. It'll really start to build some momentum to the upside. But I really like the fact that it's still holding this rising support, right? The trend is starting to move. But you can see that since September 21st or 22nd, when we had that swing high, it's just been flat since then, right? So we're going on 2 weeks of just sideways, range getting narrow here. And near term, the two levels I was watching is a close above 6,700, which is this top yellow line, and a close below 6,430, 6,440, around there, would really signify a break out of this near-term range, very short-term range. But you got to keep in mind, to us, because we've been living in this low volatility era, for lack of a better word, this looks big. But if you really zoom out, I mean, this is tiny, right? I mean, look at how this compares to relative weeks in the past, right? I mean, these weeks are kind of what we were used to. And these last 3 weeks, I mean, you're talking about some pretty narrow price ranges for the entire week. And so a breakout of this would be significant in the sense that it'll start to finally move the needle in terms of expanding the price range. Obviously, we want this to break higher. But that's just something to keep in mind, right? So looking at the 4-hour chart, if you're trading this, obviously you're looking at this going, whoa, these are some big moves. And they certainly feel like it, right? Remember this move where we had that big shakeout and the fake out and follow through? I mean, that was pretty significant, right? Percentage-wise. But in the big scheme of things, you're talking about a $400 or $500 range. It's not that big relative to what we've seen in the past. And so just keep that in mind. but it's looking pretty good. And that's what I'm liking, is this overhead resistance. I want to see this taken out, and it's testing it today. There's some good volume coming in, which is what you want to see when prices start to move higher. You want to see that volume that shows a little bit of conviction, but it's not like mega volume, right? It's not huge. It's certainly higher than the last couple of days, but it's not outrageously huge volume. So still not, not all right. But it's okay. What I'm trying to say is, don't get complacent, right? Everyone on Twitter is talking about, oh man, it's the end of the bear market and we're breaking the downtrend line and it's all great. But at the end of the day, it's like, guys, we're still very much in range. I mean, we're not out of the woods by any means. The only thing is price is going flat. It's going sideways, right? We're still very much in this downtrend. Yeah, it's testing the upper trend line. I get that. And I'm with you guys. I hear it. But at the same time, it's like, we're definitely not out of the woods. Ultimately, you're going to have to break this bigger downtrend line. And if things really take off, that $7,400 swing high that we saw at the beginning of September, getting above that would be significant, because it'll do two things. Getting above that $7,400 swing high would, one, change this big pattern of lower highs, right? We've seen these lower highs throughout the year. You get a high there, swing high there, swing high there. Every time it would rally, it was just a lower high. And the rallies were the 618 fib levels almost every single time, right? And so you saw that pattern established. So if it breaks higher and starts to take that out, that would be the first step in really starting to change the bigger picture, because now you're breaking this bigger long-term pattern of swing highs that are just lower highs. And it's not going to take a lot. I mean, you're within $1,000 of that happening, within $500 of that happening now. So it's definitely not a lot, but that'd be significant, because it would break that. And it would also start to get prices above this broader trend line, the big trend line that we've been seeing act as a level of resistance since February, right? So this has been something that a lot of traders and investors have been keeping an eye on. So getting above that would certainly be significant from that perspective, right? The other thing on the low end, of course, is if we break below, what happens then, right? Is it a fake out? Is it another test to the downside? Now, me personally, I would love to see a fake out, just because that sets up a much stronger a bottoming process, right? I mean, we're certainly having a bottoming process. There's absolutely an argument to be made that, hey, this is a big accumulation process happening. But at the same time, if we saw a big volume break to the downside that was quickly bought up and prices recovered, I would be much more aggressive at entering at that point than I would if we broke higher, right? Because a break higher, you got resistance and you eventually going to get a pullback. But if you break lower and tons of buyers show up and the price just zips right back up, for me, that would just be a much stronger bull signal, in my opinion. And that would scare a lot of people out too, right? And people would freak out. Oh, here we go. Here comes 5K. Here comes 3K. All the short sellers would jump in and would likely trap a lot of people in the wrong direction. And that's just how markets generally work. So I would like to see that personally, but at the same time, the alts are looking great. The trades are working to the long end today. So let's not break it. Right? It's like you can't have it both ways. So that's BTC in the big picture. But at the end of the day, as long as Bitcoin holds up, even remains range bound, I'm still trading the alts. I'm still liking the alts over BTC, and primarily because they provide a higher percent gain, right? I mean, if Bitcoin goes up to 7,400, that's significant, but that's a 10% move. You're getting that today in some of the alts, right? Ontology had a significant move off the lows, right? It was up 9% at the peak today, was up about 12%. And so, the percent difference is much better in the alts when the alts decide to start outperforming. And so we've seen Tron, right? Double-digit gains in the last couple of days. You saw Bitcoin Cash a few weeks ago, Ripple, right? So those are the type of moves that excite people, right? Bitcoin moving up 10%, that's huge, no doubt, especially the market cap that it has. But people want to get excited about these alts moving up, 20%, 30%, right? I mean, that's what everyone wants to see. And so that's where I'm still leaning in favor of the alts. I think the alts are still going to do well. And a lot of the big picture looks like they're finding a pretty decent low here near term. Now we want to see some more follow through. So let's look at ETH, another big name here. And I've been watching this. It was in a big symmetrical pattern here for the last couple of days and finally breaks out here today with some pretty good volume here. And there's a couple of things to note on this pattern, right? Obviously, the tightening of the price, right? The range getting narrow. But look at the volume while this happens, right? Look at the volume. The last couple of days of volume have been very low volume, right? Another indicator that I like to use is when you see the volume really dry up, when prices get very narrow, it just tells you that a break is coming imminently, right? Now, this is a symmetrical pattern, and it's a neutral pattern, right? It's not as strong as, say, an ascending triangle base. I mean, that's my favorite to trade, but this is symmetrical, and it could have broken either way. It could have very easily just had a big volume sell-off and broken to the downside. But a lot of the alts are already breaking higher over the last couple of days, and it just leads me to believe we were going to see some more upside, which is why I've had the bullish bias here and have been taking the long end over the last couple of days. But you can see the volume just really drying up, and then here today, volume starts to kick in. And if we zoom in a little bit, going to that 4-hour chart, you can see where it started to break out a little bit, and here the last several 4-hour candles, seeing some pretty good volume coming in on that first move up. So good early signal, right? Doesn't mean it's like, boom, it's the end of the world, we're taking off, but definitely a good early signal that, hey, maybe this wants to go higher, and I want to see some confirmation with some close above that 233 level. Getting above that would start to negate all these prior days and start to close at a new relative high over the week. And so getting above that 233 would certainly, for me, signify that, hey, this is going to see some more upside. If you look at some of the technicals, the daily chart, RSI, is flat in the middle of the road here, right? It's right at 50. So definitely not oversold or overbought in any direction. It's just neutral. So if it continues higher, it has plenty of room to run to the upside. And the first resistance level to be keeping an eye on would be this last swing high, right around 253, 254. And then above that, this prior base that broke down with the significant breakdown is going to be some pretty good resistance, right? So getting above 270 would be very good for ETH, but that's going to really be the first target for me on the upside. So, you know, from here up, you're still talking about another 15% or so if it can get that high. So not bad all around. And I like to take these type of trades when they start to move higher because your downside is relatively limited if you're using stops because you know where the support level is, right? And even if you wanted to give it a little bit to the downside, you don't have to give it a huge amount because you have a pretty well-established support range. So if you did something like that, right, and let's say you put a stop around 220 or even lower, 215, looking at the risk reward ratio on something like this, right, it's a 2.34, right? Not a outrageously great home run trade, but it's over 2-1, right? And that's usually my minimum on a trade. I won't take a trade unless at least there's a 2-1 risk reward ratio. Ideally, you want it to be as high as possible, but you always want to look at what's realistic. And, you know, you can certainly make that a tighter trade if you tighten up the stops and that suddenly goes to 3-1 here, right? So, you know, there's ways around that, or you can wait for a better entry and vice versa. But ETH is still looking pretty good. And if this starts to really get some movement, that's going to show well for the alts all around. Looking at it from the BTC pair, see here, and we'll go to Binance. We'll stick to the Binance. It's still in range. It's still not officially broken out, right? At least not the way I've drawn the pattern. If you tighten it up and use the candle bodies, you can say it's breaking out already. But, you know, I'm saying it's not in range or not breaking out yet from the BTC pair, but it's looking pretty good, right? And there's some volume coming in. You can see here, this is on the 4-hour chart. You know, 3 candles ago or 2.5 candles ago, there was this big green volume spike above as it tries to push higher, and here it is starting to edge higher. So looking pretty good from that perspective. If this really gets going, I want to see a candle like this, right? I want to see one of these guys with some big volume spike to push it out of this range. That would be much stronger, in my opinion, as opposed to it just kind of gradually just kind of edging up, right? I want to see that big impulse push higher and then it hold. And that's really, you know, the better scenario there. So definitely looking good all around, but it's still in range there for the ETH side. All right, let's see here. So some of the other names that I want to look at, let's cover the big names first. Bitcoin Cash. Now, Bitcoin Cash, I like the daily chart on this one here for a little bit longer of a setup. Let me erase this line here because this was really the breakout point here. But what you want to notice is, right, we had these big volume spikes. And yes, I know this was like the ICO or the IPO. and some of that other stuff, and I get all that, but it's held up relatively well. And you can see here, this was the resistance or the support level that broke down, became resistance over here. And it broke right through that on some very strong volume. And hasn't done a whole lot since then, but you can see it's held that support. And so now it's starting to turn the corner, starting to really edge up a little bit. And if we zoom into the 4-hour chart, you can see there's some pretty good volume coming in right now. I mean, not a lot, but if you look at the pattern, right, that's really the thing you want to make note of, right? Look at the volume pattern, right? You see the big green candles here? That might be hard to see for some people. Let me see it right there. See the big green spikes, right? Especially near the lows. That just tells you that as it starts to hit this support level, it's being defended, right? There's some buyers showing up there. And so that's good sign of accumulation, right? Good volume pattern there, in my opinion. And so now that it's starting to turn the corner here, it was in a pretty decent little downtrend, narrowing right there, and it's starting to edge higher, right? You can see the corner is starting to turn there. And so that's looking pretty good. On the daily chart, I think it just looks much stronger from that perspective. Looks like it may have found a low and starting to get higher. So the first resistance level is this most recent swing high, right? So that's going to be, you know, in and around there. Exact value here on the Coinbase side is 591.88, so 592. And then above that, you know, this most recent level here, right? So that's what I'd be looking at. If you do the same kind of math on a trade like this, right? And I'm just kind of sharing my thought process. This is how I assess which trades to take and which ones to pass on and that sort of thing. If you would set a stop just below the most recent swing low, that's about a 6% stop. If you put your target here at the top there, you're barely at a 2.1 risk multiple, right? You're at a 2R, 1.95. And so either you got to put a tighter stop, or you're going to have to wait for a bigger target, right? And if you go up here, if you hit that target, that's a 23% gain, almost a 4R multiple, right? It's 3.7. And so it just depends on your time frame. There's pros and cons to both, right? Because if you're going to trade longer, chances are it's going to work out. If it's working out, you're going to make a bigger percent, but you're going to also have some wiggles along the way, right? It's not going to just go straight there. And so it's one of those, do you take the faster gain, smaller, faster gain, or do you wait and hold out and have some patience and take the potentially bigger gain, but it's going to take you a little bit longer, right? And so it's just a little bit of a trade-off, but all around, it's looking pretty decent there. So that's what I'm looking at. Those are the two targets near term that I'm watching here on Bitcoin Cash. So 592, and then around this 652 level. Ripple. All right, Ripple, everyone's favorite Ripple. So in my last video, I was talking about Ripple, and I was saying, you know, it kind of looks weird. The chart just looks odd. It just felt a little toppy to me. At the time, we were right around here, and it was just one of these. We had this rally, pulled back, you know, just kind of like wedging up. I wasn't too excited about it, but it has pulled back, and so far it's holding up, right? So if I wanted to look at Ripple, I like it a lot better here than I did up there, right? Because up there, the chart just looked a little odd. Here it is now. It's starting to build a little bit of a bigger term symmetrical pattern, right? You can see with the higher lows, but there's still very much a resistance level to be keeping an eye on here around that 63-cent mark. But at least it's holding up a little bit of a support level. So if I wanted to look at Ripple, this would be a better spot to look at it, because it's kind of built a little bit of a support level here over the last day and a half or so on this 4-hour chart. And so right now, near-term support is going to be that 46-cent zone in around there, just below that, right? If it starts to break below that, then you're going back to these lows here at 43.5. So that's what I'd be looking at. And then, of course, getting over resistance. There's quite a few levels here, and I think there's going to be some hurdles just because you probably had a lot of people FOMOing into this guy as it was so exciting, and people were trying to jump in before swell. But so you're going to have some resistance going in around 51. And then ultimately this most recent swing high above 60 cents. So those are really the two kind of key levels to be watching on Ripple. Now, Ripple BTC, pretty similar pattern here, right? You can see that had that big run up and then had that swing low here on the 25th, and most recently putting in a little bit of a base. But I'll be honest with you, not my favorite setup. You know, there's much better setups in my opinion that I like, better risk reward entry setups. So not my top candidate right now. Let's go to EOS. Here's one I do like. So So looking at EOS, here's the dollar pair on EOS, and it's just been building this very large pattern since middle August, right, where it had that swing low in August on the 14th, and it's just kind of really been tightening up here. And then you can see here in the most recent history, just like so many others, right, just very tight, very narrow price action here on the dollar pair. But on the US, not the USD pair, on the BTC pair, I'm really liking this guy here on this pair, right? So because it's a lot flatter. And let me zoom out here. I know I'm jumping all over the place. Sorry about that, guys. But you can see how narrow this price has gotten here in the last, what is that, week and a half or whatever, last couple of days. This is the daily chart. And so it's just now breaking out today over this level on the BTC side. And so here's the 4-hour chart. You can see this was a pretty clear level of resistance for some, a couple of days now, and starting to move higher here, starting to really edge out. The next level is going to be just above, right? So it's going to has a little bit of levels to clear along the way up, but I like this setup a lot better from the bigger perspective, because if you look at the daily chart again, just very clear base being established, right? It had this big drawdown. Most names topped going into that May timeframe, May 5th, some earlier, some later, but since then, just a big drawdown, right, across the board for most names. And this is the BTC pair, right? So you look at the USD pair, a much steeper drop, but this is down 72% since the highs. And then it found a low in August, and since then it's just kind of been accumulating, building this big base. And so that's looking pretty good there. Liking what I see there. And now today just starting to clear out a little bit on above average daily volume. And so good to see that all around. Ultimately, it's got to hold this low, right? If it comes, and we see this happen a lot. You'll look at IOTA right now and it did this, but you'll see a breakout, pull back in, maybe break out again, right? But this is the level to be watching. The trend line, and then this most recent swing low, which right here is around 85.97, 85.94, right? That's really the key level to be watching. If it breaks out and then breaks below that, for me, that tells me that's just a failed breakout. I'll just get out of the way at that point, right? And wait for another setup. So that's how I look at that. Anywhere in between there, it's just really the noise, in my opinion, and potentially secondary entries. So, and you can see that that would line up with the relative volatility of this most recent price action. I mean, that's just the range could certainly bring it back down to the trend line and bounce right off and still be fine. So that's how you want to look at those. But EOS looking pretty good all around. Let me go back to the USD pairs here. So we were talking ETH, EOS, Bitcoin Cash, Ripple, Cardano. So Cardano was on the list here and finally broke out and was looking pretty good. And so you can see very similar pattern and broke above range. And really that was your first signal there, right? The break above range on some good volume, pulled back a little bit, and just has been stair-stepping its way higher. So definitely looking nice here from that perspective, making some good progress. You're seeing a pullback happening right now. It's not unusual. A lot of these names, the RSI was starting to hit some high levels. Some of them are still way up here. This one's not too extended. We'll look at a few others that are much higher than that, but it's just moving out of range, right? You can see it's broken this downtrend, and you can just start to see the little stair-stepping its way up higher. So really good to see that all around. And again, on the daily chart, nowhere near being overbought yet. So if they can start to move higher, they have room to run, technically speaking. Resistance is going to be this level here, which is basically where it paused at today, around that 89, 90 cent mark. And then above that, I mean, the most recent swing high is not much higher than that. So I'd be really looking at this dollar, or excuse me, not dollar, this 10.6 cent mark or whatever. So those are the two levels that I like on Cardano. Cardano BTC still sitting tight, still looking pretty good here. So I'm liking what a good little setup here on the BTC pair, right? And a lot of these are moving higher just because Bitcoin is certainly seeing some upward movement right now. But I like the volume that's coming in. And again, the big picture, right? That's really what I keep harping on, is this big picture that we've seen put in a low. Now, is it the low? Is it the ultimate low? Well, that's anyone's guess, and I'm definitely not telling you that it is, because we have not seen confirmation of that. Absolutely not. So it's way too early to tell. But could you see one of these? Could it be one of these lows that result in a, 30, 40, 50, in this case, it was a 78% move, counter trend rally? It could be, right? It could certainly be one of those moves that just turn out to be a nice counter trend rally. I mean, think about it. Getting up to this resistance here on Cardano, which was the prior base, That's 42%, right? Even if that's all it is, the counter trend rally right up to resistance, for me, I'd take that trade all day long, right? That's a 42% move. And so definitely not saying it's the low. So don't get me wrong here, but they're putting in some very nice bottoming formations, right? I mean, you're seeing this support coming in, the volume's kicking in here, a lot of buying volume showing up, sitting tight, getting ready to break out. So from a trading perspective, I like what I see for some good counter trend trades. Right, that's what I'm looking at. All right, so Cardano. What was my list here? IOTA. Another one that I like. Very similar pattern, right? You see the low. You had that swing high. IOTA had a huge move back in August, and since then it's just been sitting tight. I mean, look at how narrow this price range has gotten. Again, this is IOTA dollar pair, and very tight range, just right, set up for a good channel breakout pattern. I actually jumped on this one earlier, and I shared this trade with the team here yesterday, and I got in on a break above this 58.5 level. And so to me, that was just an early entry because it was clearing this near-term resistance here. So liking that, good volume coming in, so definitely confirming the bullish action here. But I think they're due for a little bit of a pause, right? This is the 1 hour chart. RSI on these are getting a little elevated. On the 4 hour chart, a little elevated, right? So I'm definitely not in the mode of chasing the breakouts. When they're sitting flat and really tight like that, if you get in right at the breakout point, it's definitely okay. But most often, you're getting a chance to get in on a pullback. So it's okay to be patient right now. You don't have to FOMO in. Not all of them are going to give you the pullback, but that's just the cost of risk management, in my opinion. I like to just wait for these secondary entries, these little bit of a pullbacks, let things cool off a little bit. And so there's a couple of ways to look at pullback entries, but the first easy one is, does it pull back to support and hold, right? If it pulls back that far and starts to turn the corner, that's always a good secondary entry, but they don't always pull back that far, but that'd be the first level I've been looking at. But all around, big picture, IOTA still looks good. In the daily charts, technically hasn't broken out yet on the daily chart, right? It's still in this big range. And so getting above that 63.5, 64 would, closing above that would be considered a solid breakout out of this little range that it's been in. So IOTA is definitely one should be watching from that perspective. Sorry, I had to take a drink there. All right. Let me go to my list here. I had a list. 1 second. And I'm going to take some names from you guys too. So let's look at Icon. So looking at Icon here, let me clear all this mumbo jumbo. There's some notes that I was sharing, but similar pattern on Icon, right? So you can see here, this is the USD pair. Again, what I liked about this one was this rising support line here, just kind of really starting to move up. And then it got pretty flat right here, right, crossing around that 69-cent mark, and just was sitting tight for, what, a week and a half. Very nice to see. And then on the 4 hour chart, just kind of watching this lower trend line. So just a confluence of resistance there. And today it started to break out on some pretty good volume, right? Above average at least. And so you're seeing that move happen on above average volume. That's what you like to see. I think it has room to run still. Not a huge mover today, but just starting to edge out. First target that I'm looking at is around that 78, 79-cent mark, which was this swing low back here. And then above that, somewhere in this zone, up to around 95 cents. So that'd be a huge move if it got that high. Not necessarily going to hold out for that, but this first move would be about 20% or 12%, excuse me. Second move would be about 30%, but definitely looking good. So Icon was on the list, and it was a trade I entered earlier today. Vechain, definitely on the list here. And you can see this was a range breakout trade for me as well. I was looking at this lower range. The thing I liked about Vechain, if you go to that daily chart again, let me zoom out, right? Let me clear all these notes because these are distracting here. 1 sec. But the thing I liked about Vechain here was how tight that price range got. I mean, it was just incredibly flat. I mean, just it was ripe, just prime for a breakout here. And then looking at the volume, I mean, the volume just dried up significantly for the last 3 days. And so it was definitely on my radar, one to keep an eye on here. And then today started to break out a range here. This is the 4-hour chart at a pretty decent move. Again, R size, a little bit elevated. So definitely something to keep an eye on, but it definitely cleared this little bit of resistance zone here. So good stuff. I mean, Vechain's setting up, especially when you see it that tight, when the price range is that narrow, it's ripe for a good breakout. So could it have broken down? Absolutely, right? You never want to preempt them. I generally don't, but this one was sitting tight. It's been a big winner in the past. We had some big, it's showing the ability to run pretty strongly. So we'll see how high it can get this time. But right now, those are the levels I'm looking at, right around that 16.016, right, the 1600 level, and then above that, if we can get that high, that'd be good. But Vechain sitting tight and just getting started, in my opinion. So I think it's still in range. Smash that like button, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. We're just going to look at these charts as the altcoin market is still moving strongly here. There's been moves over the weekend, right? So we were looking at Cyber Miles on Friday, made for some good trading over the weekend. Definitely had some, and I was on quote unquote vacation, but still had to, there was some decent trades to be had on my in between time. And so this one was looking pretty good here. Some small cap names, Salt, remember Salt? Ooh, Salt had that big pump here. And I missed this one. I posted this one. I posted this one for the group when it was right here. And I said, hey, Salt's moving, blah, blah. I'm looking for a pullback entry. And then, I was away from the computer and this happened, right? But I probably wouldn't have bought that pullback anyway. And then boom, then it was gone. So, but we'll see what it does now. It is pulling back here a little bit, trying to turn the corner here on this 4-hour chart. So maybe it's done, but there's been some pretty decent little pops off the lows on some of these smaller cap names. Names like, this one's been a favorite here for the group, but look at how steady this one's just marching along here, right? I mean, just moving higher. I put a little cup and handle pattern here that it broke out of. And really, at the end of the day, the resistance level was really the thing to be watching. And it gave you a couple of chances to jump in, right? It had the big breakout and it pulled back here for about a day and a half. But since then, just a steady little march higher. Once it cleared that 624 level, just gone, right? Just clean marching higher, very nice. So definitely have been some good trades along the way here in some of these smaller caps. This is up 45%, right? Not too shabby. So definitely looking pretty good. And then Tron was a good trade last week as well. And I think it's a little extended here near term. I'd like to see a pause, but once it broke out of this overall downtrend, this was the way I entered Tron, right? So Tron had that breakout. I didn't jump on it on the breakout, but I was looking at the pullback. And in this case, it did offer a pretty decent pullback. So let me go here. Let me go to the 1-hour chart. You can see it was really accumulating here. So you could have entered here on the 1-hour chart. This was a little bit of an ascending triangle, right? It had that nice rally and then just paused, gave you the 2 dips. And so you could have certainly entered on a breakout there. I didn't. I just wasn't, this probably middle of the night or something my time, but I wasn't watching it when it happened. But that would have been a good first entry. But then it pulled back and I was able to enter on the pullback. But that's, this is a good example of one. Oops. This is a good example of one that, it's just still strong. Just moving higher, pulling back. And you guys know I like to use the 10 EMA as one of my shorter term moving averages, especially on the 4-hour chart. Look how many times this thing came back to that 10 EMA. Pull back there, here it undercut, recovered, pulled back there, pulled back here, pulled back there, right? So it certainly gave you a couple of entries, secondary entry points along the way. Me personally, at this point, if I wasn't in, I would wait. I would probably just wait for a little bit more of a setup. You could be seeing it happen now, right? Could be sitting up here at this point, but definitely had a nice move. And again, this one at the breakout points, peak to peak, it's not bad, 28%. And so we're definitely seeing some good movement in some of the alts as Bitcoin has just kind of sat tight, right? So as long as Bitcoin doesn't start getting crazy on us, it's still pretty good. But it looks easy when you see it in the rear view mirror. But to be honest, it wasn't that easy, right? Because if you were watching the charts over the weekend, Bitcoin had these big wicks. It looked like it was about to get going and had that big move higher, and then it pulled right back, and then it had a big wick lower, right? So it definitely wasn't that easy, right? I don't want to make it seem like that because depending on your time frame, if you're trading the 1 hour charts, there was a lot of whipsaw happening in the alts during these big Bitcoin wicks, right? Over 2 hours, right? So just something to keep in mind, and that's still going to happen. That's the nature of crypto. Unfortunately, you're going to get those. So taking a quick look at the coin market cap here, move this here. So I mean, there's some pretty decent moves across the board. Cyber Miles, we just looked at that one. Ontology, probably one of the bigger ones here today. Walton was moving nicely. Vechain, IOTA, Tron has already been moving, and pretty good, just green across the board. So nice to see for a change. The last couple of weeks, Monday have been kind of the bloody Monday, but good to see some of that here. So all right, I'm going to take a look at some of your guys' charts to see what you guys want to review here. Cardano, we did that one, so we'll come back to that one later if we have time. Substratum, we'll take a look at that one. Oh yeah, Quantum's looking pretty good. We'll put Quantum on the list here. We did Icon. Neo, we haven't done Neo. We'll take a look at Neo. We did Vechain, definitely one of my favorites right now. Bitcoin Cash, looking good. Siacoin, that's been a favorite one. Let's do that one first. I know that's been getting a lot of action here lately. So Siacoin, let me zoom out, 4 hour chart, or excuse me, the daily chart, right? It's just kind of stair-stepping its way higher, but it's had these big moves, and these are very quick daily moves, right? I mean, look at that. That's a 32% in a day. So not insignificant, right? Another one, 26% a day. So certainly you've been getting a lot of attention from that perspective. And this one has put in a huge base here at the lows and starting to get a lot of accumulation. Now, near term, if you go to the 4 hour chart, it is setting up potentially again. So it's looking pretty good here. I'd be keeping an eye on this level here, this most recent swing low. Good level of support to watch here. So looking at that. But it looks like it's finally turning the corner here. So I'm liking this new little setup here in the big picture. Let me zoom out here a little bit, right? And so there's a couple of resistance levels to be watching on the upside. Obviously, it paused right at this prior base. You can see the wick here. So that'd be your first target if it decides to move higher. But then above that, if it can clear this level, you've got a big resistance level right there. And so that window would be, really the big window to be watching there on the upside if it continues higher, right? And that's a lot considering it's already moved this much, but then you're talking about another 30%, give or take. So all around, though, still looking good. Wouldn't argue with that one. All right, let me see here. I'm going to take the list down. So we've got 0x. Did we do Ontology? We didn't, did we? Let me do Ontology first because I meant to do that one. And so another one that's looking pretty good here. And this is one, look at how, again, look at how flat this chart got here. And this is Ontology Tether, this is a dollar pair. But, the range to be watching on this guy was basically right here, right? This $1.96, $1.97 level. And you can see how tight this was getting. Volume was sitting pretty tight. And then big breakout today. I mean, just a big move on this. Again, up like 9% or something in an hour. What was that? About 8%. So moving pretty good and still moving higher, but it is feeling a little extended here near term. I'd like to see this one pause and maybe sit tight for a few 4 hour candles. And by that, I mean, look at the RSI. It's at 76, 77. On the 1 hour, it has sat tight for a little bit. So it's letting the RSI pull back a little bit, but it's wedging up, right? So it's like wedging up a little bit on the 1 hour as the RSI kind of cools off. Generally, I don't like to see that. So for me, I'd like to just see it pause a little bit on the 4 hour chart, let it sit tight. I'd feel a lot more comfortable about initiating a trade from that perspective, just because risk is higher when it looks like this. It could easily pull back to the 10 EMA and be just fine, right? So I'd be looking for probably a better entry, but in the big picture, it looks great. I mean, on the big picture, you look at the daily chart, hasn't even cleared this resistance yet, right? So definitely looks great from that perspective. The daily chart, very strong on the dollar, very good breakout on that daily chart. So I like the way this one's setting up here. Ontology BTC, very strong breakout today. Look at that daily volume above average after very narrow price range here for about a week. So definitely looking good and clearing some good resistance there. So all in all, I like it. I think it's going to do well. All right, let me go down the list here. Substratum. Ooh, look at that nice sell volume coming in today. I hadn't looked at this chart here. I haven't done any research on this, so if you guys know what's up, post it in there for others to see, because I haven't followed up on this one yet. But looks like it broke a pretty decent uptrend here. You can see there was a level of support starting to form here on this guy, and definitely breaking it. And so we're seeing some big volume here at the lows. Maybe that's climactic selling volume. Not sure what's going on there, but you know, there's so many other good setups right now on the crypto, on the alt market, that I would pass on this guy personally. But if you like the project, big picture, maybe it's putting in a little bit of a base here at the lowest. And so many of the alts are, I mean, they've had this big decline since May, and you know, middle of August is really where it started to kind of find a low on a lot of these names, right? And that's what I talked about in my newsletter, and I gave some examples. I think some of the examples I gave were Ontology, Neo, Omisigo, EOS, ETH. I mean, there was a few charts I threw in there just for example's sake, but very similar pattern, right? You had this huge drawdown and just starting to flatten out a little bit. Now, does this mean automatically that the alts just start taking off? Not necessarily. They could just find their floor, their base, and just sit tight for a long time, right? That's always a possibility. But off the lows, you tend to find some pretty decent little counter trend rallies and bounces. But right now, I'm not liking the setup here. Let's see what else. Neo. Neo, let's go to Neo BTC here first, because this is really the chart that I'm watching on Neo. Neo BTC, right? Let me clear this. You can see very tight action, very narrow on this guy here. And so as long as it holds this support, it's just really starting to accumulate right here, right? You can see slightly higher lows, not drastically, but definitely edging up a little bit. But it, you know, it's still in this pattern of lower highs. So we want to see this thing break out above on the daily chart at least. So, you know, near term, not bad, especially in the shorter term time frames, right? If you go to the 4-hour charts, looking like it's trying to bounce off of this here a little bit, but there's going to be some resistance right here, right? Getting above this zone, let me change the color of that for you guys. Getting above that zone on the BTC pair would be very bullish, right? Because it would start to signify a good change in this pattern and making a higher high as opposed to some of these lower highs. And so that's what you want to see. And that's really the level I'd be watching here. On the USD pair, it's going to benefit if BTC continues to hold up well. And so there's a USD pair, right? Very similar price action. Not as strong as like an Ontology, but you know, all it takes is a little bit of volume and it'll pop it right up. So the equivalent dollar pair is right, basically that $19, $90, $20 mark, in and around there. But good support right around 1770 is really the strong level of support I'd be wanting to see this hold. All right, Walton. Yeah, Walton coin was looking pretty good yesterday. How's it looking today? Walton, nice, sitting tight here. So here's the 1-hour chart. You can see that was popped up there, flashed on the alerts, and since then it's just kind of been sitting tight, accumulating here, trying to edge out. And so I'm liking this here. Holding that moving average here on that 1-hour chart. If we go to the 4 hours, just looking like a little bit of a pause, a little bit of a flag forming right now, but looking like it wants to get going again. The only thing with these is the RSI, right? I mean, it's elevated at 75. And so let's say it has a big push higher. It's going to very quickly reach, sorry about that. It's going to very quickly reach these extreme RSI levels if it has that big, strong move. And so I would just be careful about chasing a lot of those, right? I mean, if you're in it, I'm not saying it's bad or sell it, but if I were looking to initiate a position, you know, either you get in here with this tighter stop or you wait for that initial pop and then a pullback. to kind of resets and cool things off a little bit. But these tend to move strongly, especially when the volume comes in like that. It looks really good. But all around, I mean, it looks pretty good. Daily chart, nice little breakout on the daily chart. So definitely looking good. And the daily chart, again, mind you, has plenty of room to run from that perspective. So nice little breakout on the daily chart here. Let's see here. Mainframe. Yeah, mainframe was setting up here today. Sitting tight. Looking pretty good on the daily chart there. Again, this is a small cap, lower volume. Maybe you can tell by just how squared and choppy the candles look. But on the daily chart, I mean, this big base being put in on this daily. So interesting. And this is the new one, right? You can tell, I mean, the chart only goes back here on Binance to July. But no, sitting tight there. Omise go. OMG. Let me see here. OMG. I'm going to go to Bitfinex. Where is it at? There it is. So this one's not quite broken out yet. Looking really tight, just like how like Ontology and Vechain were looking yesterday. So definitely want to keep an eye on. I'm really liking these patterns, and there's just so many that are the same right now. I mean, they all have very similar pattern. And when I started to see that across the board, when I started doing my market scans, I was like, man, everything is just ripe for a pop here. And so definitely looking good. An early signal on this guy. Let me go to the 4-hour chart. Right, and it gave it to you earlier, but it pulled right back in. But a close above, this little zone right there, which it tried to today, would be what I'd be wanting to see right here, because that's really been the near-term resistance, very short-term, but that may be an early signal. And then ultimately, a breakout would be above 375, but it looks pretty good. So 355 and then 375 is what I'd be looking at, with support really being this lower trend line that's been established here over the last couple of days, right? That's really your support level to be watching. If you wanted to look at a horizontal price support, that's basically 340. And so that's what I'd be looking at as first support on this guy. Can you blow the mic a kiss for this special occasion? Well, I was going to until I read your comment, and now I feel a little awkward about doing it. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do it. The big question is, can we break 6,800 on BTC? I think we can. Does it happen today? No. Does it happen this week? Maybe. Can it break 6,800? I think it could. That's not that much. 6,800 is right around the corner. Can it break 7,400? That's the big question. Can it break 7,400? Right? That's what we all want to see. That would be significant. 6,800, could it break 6,800? It could. It could suck everybody in. It could pop right above 6,800. Everybody goes crazy, and then it pulls right back. Let's see here. And so let me kind of regroup here. I know some of you guys joined a little bit late here, but we started talking about Bitcoin. We started talking about some of the bigger picture. And, I'm looking at crypto Twitter, and I'm looking at the comments and all that. And there is certainly reason to be excited because the alts are moving and you're seeing some good volume. But let me splash a little water on the party here. We are not out of the woods by any means, right? If you look at the big picture, we're still very much range bound. I mean, it's just symmetrical tightening up here. Now, it looks good today, and there's some good volume coming in. But in the big picture, right, the last couple of weeks, just still choppy action, right? Just up, down, sideways, choppy action. And so definitely not out of the woods. Definitely too early to be saying this is a new bull market. There's no confirmation of that yet. So just be clear about that, guys. I'm leaning bullish. I've got a bullish bias. Obviously, I took some long trades on the alts, but I'm still just in that mode of take the profits when you get them and wait, because it's too early to say this is a confirmed new bull and hodl and all that good stuff. I mean, way too early. So just want to be clear on that. All right. Let's see here. 0x. I'm liking 0x. So looking at the 0x, and I know there's some excitement around Coinbase, and some of that's driving that. This one's been on my radar anyway for a little bit now. Really what I was liking on this a couple weeks back was when it finally broke this downtrend, right? It's kind of been marching lower, broke the downtrend, And what I was wanting to see next, which we saw today, was a break of this resistance, right? So it breaks the downtrend, but it still has this overhead that it hit. You can see it tried a couple times, pulled right back in, and then today or yesterday, big volume came in as it broke through that resistance. Now we want to see it hold, but all around, I like the way it looks. It's looking pretty good. Definitely going to be a favorite if Coinbase does add it. You'll see a good upside move, I think. So one to keep an eye on. Quantum. Similar chart pattern. They're all starting to look the same, aren't they? So similar chart pattern here on Quantum, sitting tight, getting some good volume coming in today. Let me go to the 4-hour charts and testing resistance here. Near term, let me clear this line. This is what I'm watching here on Quantum, and it's right there. Like it's just now closing above that. It's just kind of mildly edging up, but that's the level to be watching. And it put a pretty good support level in. So, you know, these levels here, that 368, 370, that's really the level to be watching. If it breaks below that, that's not going to be positive because that's just been this floor for quite some time now, right? Relatively speaking. So that's really the level. It's kind of good setup for a range breakout. Monero. Monero. We were talking about this one earlier on the private stream here, but Monero, the daily chart is really what I'm wanting to see here, right? So it's had this attempt at this level a couple times, and you can see these wicks that even try to get above, but just still kind of drifting lower, putting it a little bit of a, you can almost say it's a bull flag, even though that's a little long on the tooth now to be a bull flag, but that's the overhead resistance line is what I want to see. So, you know, clearing, this is the BTC pair, by the way. So, you know, clearing here around that 1780, 1785 would really start to turn the corner if we can close above that. Ultimately, though, 1837 is what I want to see it get above because that'll really negate these last two little wicks here and look good. But the setup's there, right? Now you just got to wait, in my opinion. It's kind of drifting lower, but the setup's there. Hot is a ticker symbol, by the way. I figured that. I know you weren't just commenting on every single chart. All right, let's keep going. We'll do a few more and then we'll wrap it up. So we did most of the big names. We did Ripple, EOS. We didn't do Litecoin. Poor Litecoin. Nobody cares about Litecoin anymore. So Litecoin, you guys know, was on my radar. I was talking about this on a video. Let me go to the BTC pair. Just because it was another one of those range breakout examples. And this one hasn't broken out yet, right? It tried. All right, it had that move there and that move there, but it just pulled right back in to the range. So something to keep an eye on here. But if the market gets going, I think this is a good setup just because you can see this big base that's being built, this accumulation zone. But we want to see this thing break out to the upside. Let's see here. Lisk. I haven't looked at that guy in a while. All right, we're going to switch gears, do some more, some smaller cap names off the beaten path. I don't know, man. Lisk is, I mean, it's at least it's starting to go flat here, but this has more of a descending triangle feel than most of the others, right? Just you want to see some good volume, take this guy higher first. But maybe it is. Maybe it's done. Maybe it's done putting in a little bit of a base there. All right, let me see. I'm going to cycle through a few of these names very quickly here. Some smaller cap names. So Vechain, pulling back. There we go. So Vechain has been on the radar, and it's been flashing a lot of alerts over the last couple of days, and it's just been one that's moving higher, pulling back, moving higher, but still setting up in the big picture. On the 4-hour chart, finally clearing some resistance here. So this was the level I was looking at. Had that push over the weekend, pulled right back, trying to push again higher today, but still setting up, but definitely one I'm watching right now. Let me see here. We already talked to Walton. Walton was definitely one to be watching. ARN was on the radar earlier. How's that looking? I had that big move earlier. We'll see if it can do anything more than that. Power. Power had a pretty good spike earlier. letting that RSI cool off a little bit, still living above that 10 EMA on the 4-hour chart, which is what I like to see. Here's the volume, but a lot of volume coming in here today, so one to keep an eye on Power Ledger. We talked Cyber Miles, we talked Bitcoin Cash. I'm looking at my other screen here, looking at a list that I had. Steam had a big move, a little bit of volume coming in there, pulling right back. So far it's holding above this breakout point, so we'll see if it can hold up. But Steam, all right, let's see here. We did 0x, we did status. Let me see here, S&T. Smaller volume name, but trying to build a little bit of a base here. We did quantum. Oh, NAM. NAM was one that I was looking at here, and it's finally breaking out a little bit. It's just been stair-stepping, but this is what I was looking at. Here's a 4-hour, right? It had that move higher last week and then pulled back, and I was looking for a pullback. Pullback was a little bit deeper than I thought, but then it just started to get very symmetrical, really tight, and then had that push higher here yesterday and starting to move up. So not too bad here, looking at NEM. Looks like it may have found a low. I mean, this big picture, NEM just took a massive hit, but this one has been known to have some decent rallies when it gets going. So one to keep an eye on. I really like the volume that's coming in here in the big picture, right? A lot of volume coming in here at the lows. So definitely one I'm watching. Let's see here. What's the volume on the there we go. Oh, we'll have to pass on that one. We'll look at something else real quick. BQX. Near the bottom there. Couple more here. And then we did that one. Power. We did Cyber Miles. I think ARC was flashing earlier. What's ARC saying? Kind of just sitting tight here at the lows. We did Monero. Oh, Nano. Sorry, I missed Nano. I meant to do that one earlier. Looking at Nano. Hey, Nano's sitting pretty good here. I was liking Nano back here, and I actually had a small trade on it back here, but you know, I was looking at this when it broke out, but then it just kind of fizzled out and didn't do a whole lot since then. But we'll see. Maybe it's ready again. It's definitely sitting tight here and attempting to put a little bit of an accumulation zone. Very tight action. Nano, we've seen Nano have some pretty decent runs here in the past. So when it gets going, it gets going. Let's see. AGI. What exchange are you trading that on? Because I don't have my CoinGee up right now, which is why I'm lazy and I don't want to open it in the middle of a stream. I just want to keep it going. But all right. Yeah, not too bad. I mean, definitely today was a good move today. And what you want to see after these type of moves here, sorry about that. What you want to see after these type of moves, right, when you have this push out higher, you want to see it hold up, right? You've seen it in the past where you get these small cap names and they have these big spikes and they look really exciting, but then they fizzle out. They don't really lead to anything. What you want to see is a push higher, then a pause, but that holds up, right? Lets the moving average catch up, just kind of sits tight, lets the RSI cool off, and then another leg higher, right? That's really what you want to look at, a little bit more sustainable from that perspective. And it looks like it may be doing that here finally today, so not too shabby. The daily chart, pretty strong, right? A lot of volume coming in here at the lows. Not too bad. NAV. Oh, yeah, NAV. NAV was one I had on my radar last week. It had that huge move. It might be ready again. I've been keeping an eye on this one, too. Smaller cap name. I don't mind trading them. I just take smaller positions on these guys just because the liquidity is a little tougher. But huge move and then just kind of pulled back and sat tight. And I thought I was going to get going again, sitting tight again. But yeah, definitely want to keep an eye on. The challenge with these guys, though, unless you're catching the quick trades, right? Like, it's almost impossible to catch this, right? I mean, it's sitting tight and then in an hour just pop, right? But if you get a follow-up move, then that's really what you want to look for. Otherwise, you're doing like conditional buy orders and trying to catch a breakout above resistance or something like that. And in this case, I'd be looking at at 542 level, really, because it clears that. So that's going to clear this near-term resistance, and so that may be the signal. But a lot tougher to do on these smaller cap names. Link, yeah, Link. Link here. Let me clear some of this. It's been on my radar in the past. And remember, Link was moving strongly in August and just kind of been sitting tight, digesting that move a little bit here. So you can see it had that move off the lows, pulled back, another big move into September, but then just has been sitting tight right around this resistance level, which goes back to back here. And it's just kind of been sitting tight, but definitely looking good, building a little bit of a base here. And so, yeah, I'm going to put this on the list. Keep an eye on this one. Not too bad here. Zcash. Let me do Zcash Bitcoin first. If I had to pick between the two, I'd pick Monero personally, just because I've already seen the other chart. But Zcash, see Zcash dollar. Oh, tether on Polo. So on this guy here, I mean, definitely has found a little bit of a low, making some higher lows. That's positive, right? So you can see got a low, got a low, got a low, but it had some resistance right there, right around that 145. And so near term, that's the level to be watching. Not the wiggly level, the one about 130, 131, right? If it can get above that, that'll confirm that maybe it's finding a good low, and we'll retest that. So not too shabby. I like Monero a little bit better here. Let me go through this the notes here real quick. We did Vechain. ICX, we've done that. W, we did QLC. Syndicator, Cindy. I haven't looked at that guy in a while. Not on this exchange. Oh, this one's been off my radar for some time, but look at that. Had that big move a couple of weeks ago and just sitting tight still. So, yeah, not too shabby. It's definitely setting up. I'd like to see this one break out a little bit here. And near term, closing above, what is that? 362, 363, which is right there. It's knocking on the door. That'd be the first kind of good early indicator. So, yeah, not too bad. All right, we'll do 3 more, and then I'm going to wrap it up. But appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate the likes and the comments and all that good stuff. Let's see here. We'll do Digibyte. Go to the daily chart on Digibyte here. Clear that. And remember, Digibyte had that nice breakout a while back, but still kind of battling this little support zone here. At least it's holding up, so that's good news. It's been holding up. Near-term resistance, so you want to see this thing close. I'd like to see it close above that 410 level, and then you're going to have another test around 450, right? 450, 451, give or take, maybe even higher, but it's still setting up. So if it starts to break above these levels, that'd be good. Should turn my alerts off. Bitcoin, just kind of pausing a little bit here, no big deal. All right. Decred. Good. Nice daily chart, I gotta say. Good rounding bottom formation, kind of starting to form here on this daily. I mean, look at this big base. That's just so many alts are doing that, which is encouraging, right? Not saying the bottom's in again, but that's good to see. That first step is, you know, they find a low and they start to hold it. Next step is they start to break above this near-term resistance, and this is kind of a good example, right? It's just starting to clear, pushes higher on above average volumes, pulls back, moving average, pushes higher. That's very nice. So looking pretty good. And last but not least, BNB. Haven't done Binance Coin. How did I miss BNB? We'll look at the BNB because it was on my radar. So I'm liking it. It's been stair-stepping its way higher. Now look at this. BNB had a beautiful symmetrical pattern, and this was on the radar back here, and I was doing some trading on it, and then I just forgot about it. One of the guys in my group posted the chart of BNB, and I was like, oh my God, that does look beautiful. It was just sitting tight. It was just like, this guy's ready to go. And so once it did, I mean, it wasn't like an immediate moon shoot. It was a little bit choppy along the way up, but you can see once it broke out, still looking pretty good. Pulls back, see what I mean? Tests breakout points, and now it's starting to roll off that. So looking pretty good, but all in all, not too shabby here. Now BNB on the BTC pair, now not as strong looking. You can almost argue that it's a little bit of a head and shoulder type of pattern on this guy. So you know, that won't be confirmed until it breaks below, what is that, 1570 or so. But I'd keep an eye on that, right? Because you've got this kind of pattern forming on this guy. And if it starts to break below, you know, these levels, right, that trend line, that lower trend line, and obviously below the horizontal price points, whoops, that would not be good for BNB. So something I'd be keeping an eye on here. Funds are SAFL. All right, cool. Well, that's going to do it for today, guys. I appreciate you being here as always, and we'll see how the week goes. Good to have you. Till next time, take care, everyone.